And we just said, God saved our lives. I mean, we were kind of in a state of shock because we knew we should have been dead at that moment.
Well, first of all, I am beyond honored. And I know you hear this all the time, but I really mean, those others might not, I really mean it. And I found out as we're getting ready to sit down here that my birthday, November 28th, 1972, yes, I'm aging myself, actually has special meaning to you besides the fact that it's my birthday. Can you explain?
Well, way back in 1972, I was a senior at Yale and Candy was a sophomore. We were both from Detroit. Neither of us had money to go home for Thanksgiving, but Yale had a deal where if you would go back to your hometown and recruit for them, they would pay your way. So we both got our way paid. We had a rental car, and it was very nice. And we were on our way back. During that week or so, we kind of discovered that we kind of liked each other, but nothing formal, you know.
Yes.
And fell asleep at the wheel at Youngstown, Ohio, going 90 miles an hour. Awakened by the vibration of the car as it was going off the highway, heading toward a ravine. Whipped the wheel, turned it, and the car just started spinning like a spinning top. Instead of flipping over, just started spinning like a spinning top. They say your life passes before your eyes just before you die. It did. I saw the wheel. I said, this is it. Car stopped in the lane next to the shoulder, just in time for me to pull off as an 18-wheeler came barreling through. We were fully awake at that point. And we said, God just spared our lives for a reason. He has something for us to do. And that was our first kiss, and that's when we started going together. So we celebrate the 28th of November all the time, every year.
I am speechless right now.
And it was on your birthday.
And it was on my birthday.
Yeah.
Which this has nothing to do with me. The story, I was joking getting into it, and this turned out to be, okay, so take me to that scene because you came to a stop.
We came to a stop.
Your life had flashed before you. And what did you say to each other?
And we just said, God saved our lives. I mean, we were kind of in a state of shock because we knew we should have been dead at that moment. And we just said, he's clearly got something that he wants us to do. So,
had you been faithful before then?
Yes.
And so this was another reminder for you?
Yeah, our faith was strong at that point. And we regularly prayed and sought counsel from God. But that just made it very clear in our minds that he had something for us to do. And I got something in my eye.
It's not thinking back to that memory that has you teared up. You were driving?
I was.
Did you have guilt for being in that situation and beat yourself up about the close call, or was it immediately just grateful?
No, we were just grateful.
Okay.
We were very happy at that point. And that was more than 50 years ago.
Yeah. I can tell you it was 52 and a half years ago. When did you lean over to kiss her?
Shortly after we talked about God sparing our lives.
And that was your first kiss?
Yeah, their first kiss.
And from then, what happened with your relationship?
It just blossomed. We were virtually inseparable in college. And then I was 2 years ahead of her, so I had to go. I went to the University of Michigan for medical school while she finished up there. But we wrote to each other every day. And one phone call, we spent 6 hours on the telephone.
Oh my God.
And we were so afraid of what the bill was going to be. We never got the bill. I think they looked at it and they said that it was a mistake. You know,
This can't be accurate.
They just crossed it off.
Do you remember what you spoke about for 6 hours?
I mean, we just like talking to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're coming up on 50 years married this year, 1975, right?
July the 6th, yeah.
Do you have something special planned?
We're evaluating various options, but no, we already took a nice cruise in February to Australia and New Zealand. And we're already scheduled to go to Italy in October.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll figure out something.
Okay. You better surprise her with something big, Dr. Carson. Yes.
Indeed.
You know, that's something that I've always admired watching you is with Candy by your side in every possible way. And certainly business-wise and writing books, etc. But as a wife, how, and I know it's not easy. My parents are about to hit 54. What would you say has been the key to you all not just staying married, but remaining in love?
Having fun together, doing stuff that you like to do, like playing games, playing pool. Just, I'd say we're kind of addicted to each other.
Oh my gosh, that's so wonderful to hear. I don't know if I want you to keep going deeper on that or not. Playing games, so board games?
Things like Taboo.
Oh yeah, that's great.
We love playing Taboo.
But who's the pool shark?
I tend to do well with that. Candy didn't play pool at all when we got married. And she finally concluded if she was going to have quality time with me, she had to learn how to play. So she's pretty good now.
Is she? I would love to hear some Carson household trash talk. Is there any?
No.
Okay, fine. I'll leave it alone. What would you say has been the most challenging part over the last 50 years of your marriage?
Probably just being so busy. Because, you know, when I became director of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins, pediatric neurosurgery at Hopkins was not a significant entity, you know, nationally. And, you know, to work extremely hard. By 2008, pediatric neurosurgery at Hopkins was ranked #1 in the country by U.S. News and World Report. A lot of work went into that.
Yeah.
And, you know, Candy did a masterful job of raising the boys. And I just wasn't there as much as you should be. I kind of made up for it because I was doing a lot of talks all over the world. And I always required, instead of a big honorarium, that my family come with me.
Really?
So the kids all had frequent flyer cards to every airline. They traveled all over the world. And we had a lot of quality time together.
So even when they were in school, you'd pull them out and have them travel with you?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because I wanted them to know who their father was. Otherwise, they would have been saying, Mom, that strange guy was here again last night.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're all very good with their kids. They all have contributed to the grandkid pool. They all got married in 2011.
All in 2011?
All the same year.
Oh my goodness. You're lucky they're not girls. You would have had 3 weddings to pay for. Or did you?
Well, they all married women from different cultures. So I didn't have that advantage.
You didn't quite escape like you thought you would.
That's right.
Wow. You know, I think that's profound that you chose to take them with you on the road across the world. Completely different from your upbringing. You've talked at great length through the years about how your father was not
Right.
there, was not part of your life, and your mother had everything on her shoulders.
Absolutely.
So when you think about how you grew up versus how your boys grew up.
Well, you know, my mother would always say, don't be like that guy. She used all the bad people around her as examples for us not to be like. And it really made an impression on me. And she would take us to the places where she worked as a domestic, cleaning people's houses. They were beautiful neighborhoods. And then when she would say, would you rather live in this neighborhood or in this neighborhood where we are, where that guy is sitting on the curb with a paper bag drinking from it like nobody knows what he's drinking?
Yeah.
I said, which one would you prefer? She says, because you have a choice and you get to decide.
Mm. And during that time, you said before that you knew how tough it was for your mom and you and your brother, right? Can you take me back to those times? Obviously, your boys didn't grow up that way,
Yeah.
but to those times where you saw what your mother was doing and sacrificing
Yes.
to try to allow you guys to dream.
Well, you know, she would leave the house at 5 in the morning and get home at midnight. So we were latchkey kids. But we knew that she was doing that for us. My mother was a very attractive woman. She had no end of potential suitors, and she just let them all know, you know, my duty is to make sure that my boys are successful. And, you know, she was very distressed when we were doing poorly in school because she figured we would end up with little in the way of skills and we would have a difficult life like she did. But she prayed and she asked God to give her direction. And she just started looking around her at the beautiful homes that she worked in. And she noticed that they didn't watch a lot of TV and that they did a lot of reading. And she said, maybe if I make my boys read books and stop watching so much TV. And that was just a hunch of hers. Her friends were brutal on her. They said, you can't make boys stay in the house and read books. They'll grow up and they'll hate you. And when I would overhear them, I would say, you know, they're right, Mother. But we had to do it. And the way she would reinforce the reading of books is she required us to do 2 book reports each week. And, you know, we subsequently found out she couldn't read them, but we didn't know that. You know, she would put little check marks and highlights and stuff on the... And it really did change our lives because as I started reading about successful people, it became clear to me that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you is you. And I stopped listening to all the negative people who were saying, you can't succeed and the society is stacked against you and this and that and the other, blah, blah, blah. I just took that stuff and threw it in the garbage. And I started reading voraciously. If I had 5 minutes, I was reading a book. And I got a real charge out of just knowing stuff, being a know-it-all. But it was really cool. And you know, my brother also, same phenomenon. He went from the bottom of his class to the top of the class. And my mother got the last laugh with her friends because one son became a brain surgeon and the other became a rocket scientist.
It's amazing. And
it wasn't a coincidence. I frequently say if everybody had my mother, we wouldn't have any problems.
Yeah, you got lucky.
But she was very determined, and we didn't want to disappoint her. because we know how hard she worked. So,
I put, as a mother of 3 myself, and they're all in college now, it's a little different, but
yeah.
I'm trying to put myself in her shoes and how she must have felt doing this alone, 3rd grade education, teenage mom.
Discovering that her husband was a bigamist.
When did she find that out?
Several years after moving to Detroit. I was probably 5 years old at that time.
How'd she find out?
I don't know. I'm not sure how she found out, but she did. And she didn't immediately divorce him because she had to have some kind of a game plan to figure out what she was going to do. And we had no idea where we were going to live. And fortunately, one of her older sisters in Boston and brother-in-law took us in. Typical tenement, ghetto, horrible situation, but at least we had a roof over our head at that time. So
that's why you left Michigan for Boston.
Correct.
After she left him.
Correct. But she was determined to get back to Detroit. And she worked very, very hard and saved every penny. My mother could stretch a dollar further than anybody I've ever seen. I remember one time she got a car dealer fired because he gave her too good a deal. I mean, she would save every penny, every dime. She would drive a car until it wouldn't even make a sound anymore. That was in the car. And then she would go and buy a new car. She'd take all this money she had saved and pay cash for it. And so she would get a really good deal because when she showed up at the dealer with all this cash, I mean, there's like no way they're letting that money out of there. So she would get just these enormous deals for her cars.
Wow. The moment when you said you realized that she couldn't read all those book reports she assigned to you, I try to imagine what that would feel like as a mother. Yeah. To have the bar really, really high for your sons, for your kids, but then not even really be able to comprehend it.
But she had an intense desire. One of the reasons she had such an intense desire to learn, because she wanted to read the Bible, and she wanted to read a lot of the inspirational literature. And so she went back to school and got her GED. She graduated from high school the same year I did.
No way. Wow.
And then she went on to college. And in 1994, she got an honorary doctorate degree, so she was Dr. Carson too.
Now, some kids might have been embarrassed that mom was graduating at the same time you were.
We were very proud of her, and my mother was a very unique person. I mean, she could watch somebody do something, and then she could do it. When it came to like draperies, and you'd go into these fancy hotels and you see these beautiful multi-layered drapes and stuff, and she would figure out how to do it, and she could make them. And she made her own clothes. They were beautiful. People saying, "Where'd you get that from?" She was extremely talented. She learned how to do ceramics and had a kiln. And she was just an incredible person.
So one son turns out to be a neurosurgeon, a pediatric neurosurgeon, and then the other one is literally a rocket scientist.
Yes.
It seems like it's made up. That seems like it's fiction.
It does, doesn't
right?
it?
So in 1987, I feel like that's when the world began to fully learn about Dr. Benjamin Carson, right? So that was when you performed. See, I'm going to get the terminology wrong. Right. Don't judge me.
Okay.
But it was the conjoined twins, the separation, and they were conjoined in the back. So what is that called?
Occipital craniopicus.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. And that was done at Hopkins?
That was done at Hopkins.
At Johns Hopkins, right up the road in Baltimore.
And it was kind of interesting how that occurred, because I had gotten very interested in conjoined twins for some strange reason. I started reading about them and trying to figure out why the results were so dismal in trying to separate them, and concluded that it was exsanguination, bleeding to death. And I started thinking, how could you keep them from bleeding to death?
Yeah.
And I was talking to a good friend of mine who was the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Hopkins, and he was telling me about hypothermic arrest, where with a baby, you can cool the body temperature till the heart stops, pump all the blood out. And you've got an hour time to work where you have to pump the blood back in, warm it up, and start the heart. I said, if we got to the critical part of the separation where they always bleed to death, and we put them on hypothermic arrest, and we separated those vessels and reconstructed them very quickly, and then started things back up again. And then I said, why am I thinking about this? I'm never going to see a set of those twins. A few weeks later, that they were asking all over the world, could anybody come up with a way that they could be separated and both survive? Because the parents did not want to choose which one would live and which one would die, because that was the standard if you were going to separate them. And that's how it came about.
So how I am scared for you, thinking about what's going through your mind as you begin, or the decision to take them on as patients, to try. Mm-hmm. What kind of conversation are you having with their parents, knowing, I guess, having to fully explain the risks?
Well, I went over to Germany to evaluate them, and to put in some scalp expanders along with the plastic surgeons. So we made a trip over there to do that. And, I was used to talking to parents about high-risk surgery, because I did a lot of high-risk surgery. And some people say, you're a hot dog. Why did Carson do this? It wasn't that. It was because I would pray for God to give me strength and guidance and direction on how to do things. And I always ask the families to pray too. And so it had nothing to do with being a hot dog. It had to do with doing what I call a BWA, a best-worst analysis. I asked 4 questions. What's the best thing that happens if I do this? What's the worst thing that happens if I do this? What's the best thing that happens if I don't do this? And what's the worst thing that happens if I don't do this? And by answering those 4 questions, it very frequently clarified what needed to be done or not done.
Were you nervous when you began that procedure?
I wouldn't say nervous, but I had a healthy respect, knowing what could happen. Very healthy respect.
How long was that surgery?
22 hours.
Oh, goodness.
We were quite exhausted at the end. At the end, I was talking to one of the other neurosurgeons in my office, and we both fell asleep in mid-sentence and woke up 3 hours later.
Oh my goodness. What ended up happening to those twins?
Well, we left them in what was called penobarbital coma for several days so that their brains could settle down. And we had predetermined when we would wake them up. And they both woke up almost in the same 10-minute period. And they were moving around. Initially, they were doing pretty well, but they both developed serratia meningitis, which is usually fatal. And it took a yeoman's effort by the infectious disease people to save them at that point. but they sustained a lot of damage to their brain from that.
Mm-hmm.
But they did survive, and that was the first time that it ever happened.
The first time you were the first person to ever lead a team to do that.
Yeah.
Was your mother alive?
Yes.
What did your mother say?
Well, she said, I always expected that if anybody could do it, you could do it.
I cannot imagine how proud she was.
Well, people would always ask her, I bet you're really proud of your son, aren't you? And she would say, I am, and I'm proud of Benjamin too.
Oh, nice. Nice. I like that. What did you learn about yourself from that one surgery? Because that, again, the world, it's really the first time the world heard your name. And I imagine every procedure, you take something from it. But that one was special.
Well, I learned to have enormous faith in God. And, I realized that a lot of the things that I got involved in and did, I didn't do on my own. I received wisdom from God. And in one case that we were doing in South Africa, we got to a point in the case where everything looked impossible. There were blood vessels crisscrossing from one brain to the other. It looked like a bowl of spaghetti. And it looked like we were not going to be able to complete separation. And I suggested maybe we could cover things over and come back in a few months, and the vessels would have delineated themselves. And the doctors from Zambia, where the twins were from, and South Africa said, it's a great idea. And I know it would probably work at Johns Hopkins, but we don't have the ability to keep partially separated twins alive. They'll die. I really felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders at that point. And I went back in there. And I honestly do not remember what I did for the next several hours. But after the case, one of the neurosurgeons said, I could not believe what you were doing. I've never seen anything like it before. And I don't remember what I was doing. But those were the first complexly joined craniophagus twins to ever survive with no neurological deficits. So,
Healing hands?
They were gifts from God. They were his gift.
How beautiful that you recognize that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said earlier how when you were in your teens that you didn't know if you were going to survive into your 20s.
Well, because I saw so much violence.
Mm-hmm.
When we were in Boston, both of my favorite cousins were killed. And it just seemed like that's what happened to people. And, but, my mother did everything that she could to try to protect us. Although, we didn't tell her all the things that were going on.
It's probably better.
It was better. She would have probably died of anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how did your relationship evolve with your mom through the years? And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When did she?
She passed in 2017.
In 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, she lived a long life.
But in 1991, she came to live with us. We were so delighted that she was able to come. And it was wonderful because, she had a big influence on our children.
That's what, 25, 27 years she lived with you?
She lived with us from
11,
then until 2011.
Okay.
She developed Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And we put her in a beautiful, very luxurious facility for people with Alzheimer's. And she hated it.
She did?
She just
Why?
She just didn't like it. And we have a cousin in Texas who was her favorite niece, who also had experience with Alzheimer's. So her last 6 years, she lived with her and her husband. So,
Did she ever remarry? Did she ever find another partner? She did not. You said earlier she had all the suitors she would have ever wanted. Why do you think she never did?
because she wanted to devote her attention to making sure that my brother and I were successful. So she played the role of both mother and father.
She sure did.
And, you know, I have to chuckle a little bit sometimes when I hear people talking about the black boys who grow up with no father and they don't have an authority figure in there. They don't know my mother.
Did she have to crack the whip on you a lot?
Not a lot, but occasionally.
Yeah. Did you ever meet your father again? Did you ever?
Yes. We didn't see him a lot, but the last time I saw him was at my wedding.
In 1975.
In 1975. And he died in 1992.
Why was that the last time you saw him?
He just wasn't a part of our lives. And, you know, my mother used to try to get him to pay child support and stuff. He wouldn't. So she just, after a while, she just gave up.
Never any communication?
Very little.
And you never
We
had
would,
to say certain things to him?
we would occasionally see him up until that time, but he just wasn't a big factor in my life, you know. From what I remember of him, he seemed like a nice person. I was always excited when I was a little kid to see him. But in retrospect, you know, we didn't see him that much even when they were married because I guess he was with his other family.
He was busy.
Yeah.
So now you look at your three boys who you said have provided how many grandchildren?
8.
Okay, that's not bad.
That's good.
Yeah. How would you characterize yourself as a father?
Well, I tried to be very attentive to their needs and to spend quality time with them. When I came home from work at night, I never brought my work with me. That was their time. And we would play video games, or we would play pool, or maybe throw the football or what have you. It was their time.
And now when you see them with their kids?
And they try to spend quality time with their kids. All of them do. They're very good fathers. And they treat their wives nice. I always tried to model how you should treat your wife. And I think they got the point.
Statistically, we all know in the Black community, those numbers seemingly have not gotten better. Or more than 70% of Black kids are born to a single parent household. Usually it's the mother that's home. You broke that trend. You switched that. You ended it for the Carson family.
But I am a huge advocate of traditional nuclear family. And many studies have shown, one study from Princeton and the Brookings Institute, that the states that have the largest number of traditional nuclear families are the states that financially do the best, have the most successful people, have the most academically gifted children. Everything is much better in those states. And it was a plan that God provided for us, the institution of marriage, where children would have role models both on the female and the male side. And it still is what is best. And what's happening in our society right now with the dissolution of the traditional family is to be expected. But we shouldn't just capitulate to it. We need to work on it. It's something that I talk about a lot when I go to different universities with Turning Point. Go ahead and get married, but make sure you marry the right person and treat them the right way. And be fruitful and multiply. We're down to 1.6 births per woman now. In 1960, it was 3.6. And that has severe implications for our future as a nation.
It feels to me like it's intentional.
It is intentional. All you have to do is go back to the congressional record, January the 10th, 1963. Congressman Herlong of Florida wrote into the congressional record the 45 goals of communism in America. That came from the book by W. Cleon Skousen, The Naked Communist. He was an FBI agent. And the things that they intended to do to bring us down. And it included things like gaining control of the public school system and the teacher unions so that you could indoctrinate the kids, gain control of the media, Hollywood, and change the culture in America. You notice how the culture has changed dramatically. You can't look at any TV series, quite frankly, before they introduce an alternative to the traditional nuclear family. And it has had a profound effect, making sexual perversion normal, natural, and healthy. That's one of the goals. Devaluing the role of fathers, the Bible, the church, all of these things. And, when you look at us as a nation, we went from a ragtag bunch of militiamen to the pinnacle of the world in record time. That was not a coincidence.
Yeah.
That was because of our values and principles. And as we abandon those values and principles, there's a downward spiral. Now, there's an attempt to change that direction, and I hope it will be successful.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you brought that up back in the early 60s. And because I think, obviously, if you're younger than that, you maybe have seen some things change in society. But when you look back at that, and this has gone according to script,
right?
Basically, it has taken a long time. But then again, that isn't that much time when you look at, we've gone from 3.6 average children women give birth to 1.6. Right. What gives you hope now that is turning around again?
Well, because I see the young people starting to buck the woke atmosphere and starting to not be afraid anymore. The problem is not that the American people have abandoned common sense. The problem is that they've abandoned courage.
Yes.
And, most people would rather stand in the corner and stare at their feet than to speak up about things that are going on. And I see that starting to change. And that's will be our salvation, because you can't be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave. Freedom is not a given. You have to be willing to work for it.
And I feel like it took this country coming to the brink of disaster, in my opinion. And November 5th, 2024
right.
was the beginning of starting over in many ways. But sadly, I do think it took the last 4 years of chaos
to make it clear to people what was going on, what they were about to lose.
Yes.
There's no question about it. Well, our founders were very clever people. A lot of people like to denigrate them because some of them had slaves and what have you. Show me any society in the history of the world that didn't have to deal with slavery.
Yes.
It's almost ubiquitous. The thing that makes the United States unique is not that they had slavery, but that they had so many people who were vehemently opposed to slavery that we fought a bloody civil war and lost a large portion of our population to get rid of it. And that's what should be emphasized in the teaching, not that we're evil, horrible people. 16, 19 in some of these programs, I think they're emphasizing the wrong thing. And, we try to teach at the American Cornerstone Institute. We have a Little Patriots program. We try to teach all of history for the kids, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the fact of the matter is a heck of a lot more good than there is bad and ugly.
So much more good.
Got to put it in perspective.
For sure, for sure. And so when you look and, hey, we're in the nation's capital, there's has been a lot of chaos here over the last several years and throughout history for sure, but
Right.
that's okay when people stand up in that First Amendment, if it's done, I think the right way. But reparations, you hear things like that all the time, and in particular from Black people.
Right.
What's your thought on that when Black people say we are owed? And to me, the question is, okay, to what end? How much?
And who qualifies?
Who qualifies? And
Because
according to whom?
We're all mixed up. I mean, I have 20% European, 3% Asian, and who knows what else.
Right.
So what percentage do I get? And I mean, it's just untenable. You can't even figure it out. It's not work out. You can't work it out. But the way I look at it, it doesn't matter where your ancestors came from. Africa, England, India, China, you're probably better off here than you would be there. So that's your reparation. You're here in America, and you're in a place where you have an opportunity to take advantage of an incredible system that rewards people who work hard. And all of us have participated in that, the innovation, the entrepreneurship. And some people say, well, Black people haven't done that. That's total garbage. I mean, just look at your shoes. Jan Matzliger, a Black man, invented the automatic shoe lasting machine, which revolutionized the shoe industry throughout the world. And, you go out there and look at the traffic signal. Garrett Morgan invented the traffic signal. Also invented the gas mask that saved lots of lives during the war. Henrietta Bradbury, a Black woman, invented the underwater cannon, made it possible to launch torpedoes from submarine. Thomas Edison's right-hand guy, Lewis Latimer, invented the electric lamp, came up with the filament that made the light bulb work for more than 2 or 3 days, diagrammed the telephone for Alexander Graham Bell. Andrew Beard, the automatic railroad car coupler, spurred on the Industrial Revolution. Elijah McCoy, the automatic lubrication system for locomotives. He had so many good inventions, people would say, is that a McCoy? Is that the real McCoy? I mean, I could go on for a long time. But, the wonderful thing about America is I can talk about that, about almost any ethnic group here. And, our diversity is not a problem. We allow people to make it into a problem. It's not a problem. And all this hatred that's going on, people need to realize we're not each other's enemies. Just because you disagree about something doesn't make that person your enemy. And I always say if 2 people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary. You can learn a lot more from people you disagree with than people who agree with you on everything.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think there's such a desire to keep the hatred up, to keep many Black Americans saying, with the reparations and and everything is about race and racism and deserving more?
Well,
why?
Because America stands in the way of one world government. And you cannot take America down militarily. The only way you can take America down is internally. And therefore, the best way to conquer is to divide. And therefore, you try to drive wedges between the population on the basis of race, age, income, gender, religion, political affiliation, you name it, drive wedges, have everybody at each other's throat. A house divided against itself cannot stand.
They've done a great job of
They've
that.
done a great job of
And
it.
hook, line, and sinker. So many have fallen for it and continue to.
But we have to keep talking about it. We have to remind people that we're not each other's enemies. I say Wayne, W-A-N-E. We are not enemies.
Mm.
We've let hatred and division wax for a long time. It's time to let it wane.
Mm-hmm. But it was a choice by you, your brother, your mother, I guess, to, hey, it's almost like what Martin Luther King said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Content of character. That's how you want to judge me versus the color of my skin.
That
And
is-
you came from an era, and the civil rights era, where it would have been easy to understand why
Right.
you would have said, no. It is different for me. In
Right.
some ways it might have been. But at the end of the day, why did you choose to not believe any of that?
I think it's because of my relationship with the Lord. You know, He's the one that I want to please. I want to live a life, according to the principles that He espoused. And if you do that, quite frankly, a lot of the other things kind of fade into insignificance.
Is that why? Well, actually, I don't know how you have handled it internally when, you're called a sellout. You're called all of the things that I've been called and many
Sure.
others for being a Black conservative.
Yeah,
And how have you handled that? And I don't mean as much today as you
Sure.
did initially
right.
when those terms came flying at you because you chose to live your life your way and
Mhm.
because of the success that you had.
Well, as long as the Lord doesn't call me a sellout, I'm cool. The way I look at it, anything that you suffer in this life is a nanosecond against the backdrop of eternity. And I'm living for that. And so I don't, I used to think it was going to bother me, people calling you names and what have you, but it really doesn't.
It never did?
It never did bother me at all. I have my wife, and more importantly, I have my God and my children and a tight circle of friends and people that I can count on. And, it's interesting. I ran into a Black minister of a big church a few weeks ago in Gainesville, Georgia. And he said, I just needed to come tell you, I apologize because I was on the bandwagon of calling you a sellout and all this stuff. And I've come to realize that's not who you are at all. And I was wrong, and I want to apologize.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's also good to see the number of people in the Black community who are waking up, who are realizing that they've been manipulated and they've been used and they're still being used. And to see particularly the Black males moving in that direction is very encouraging.
It is. I keep saying this, that I don't know that people realize the damage that Barack Obama did to me, not only during his presidency,
Right.
frankly, with making this country feel more divided, in my opinion.
Yes, it did.
But at the end of this last campaign,
Mhm.
and when he scolded Black men and basically told them to vote along racial lines,
Exactly.
scolding them. How did you take that? Because I was so offended, and it feels like many other people of color were as well.
Well, I think it's absurd to still be concentrating on people's external. I probably feel more so than most people about external physical characteristics, because as a neurosurgeon, when I would take someone to the operating room and peel that scalp back and take off that bone flap and open the door, I'm actually operating on the thing that makes them who they are. It's not their nose or their skin or their hair. It's their brain.
That I've never heard it put that way because I've never been able to sit down with a neurosurgeon, but it's so true. None of this matters, but it is such a focus for some of the most powerful people in the world.
For people who are superficial in their thinking. And they can't get beyond the superficial in the way that they see the world.
They've continued to do it, though. People like Barack Obama. It's funny, I remember in 2008, people at my work, I worked at ESPN at the time, people I very much respected, on-air people who, Black men, one in particular, who has since passed away, who I loved and always will.
Well, I think you were one of the longest hosts in ESPN's history, weren't you?
I was. Yeah. I was, yeah. And I'm grateful for every moment.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for those days. I'm grateful for what happened, how it ended, and I'm grateful for today. But I'll never forget one man in particular pulling me aside and finding out. I guess I came out of the closet that I was a conservative, which is almost what it's like, right? Like, and he said, "How can you vote for John McCain in 2008? How can you?" He was so disappointed in me. And I remember being upset that maybe he thought differently of me because I looked up to him so much and thought, oh my goodness, within our own community, we're making others feel smaller because of who they choose to vote for.
Rather than engaging them in a conversation.
Yeah. And I said at that time, he goes, it's the first Black president. And I said to me, and this is before the election, I said to me, he has the potential, yes, to be the first Black biracial, if you're going to be specific about it, president. It's great. I love seeing history. I had a 90-some-year-old grandmother at the time who, was praising God for this opportunity. And I get that. I said, to me, he's just the wrong Black president. That's all. Based on not the color of his skin, based on what he stood for. And in many ways, to me, what he ultimately did. I got crushed.
I bet.
For that. And this is really pre-Twitter, pre-social media to this level. And then I remember kind of going and hiding because of that and just keeping it quiet because it was scary. It was scary. But that's what they wanted at the time. And that's what they
want to frighten you into silence. And that will ultimately be what determines what happens to our country. Will the people of common sense, I'm not necessarily going to say Republicans versus Democrats, but will the people with common sense stand up? Or will they continue to cater to people with just crazy ideals like men playing in women's sports? I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
It's insane.
And, why do we have weight categories in boxing? We don't have the heavyweight and the featherweight boxing each other. It would be crazy. It's the same thing.
It's a great point. It's really so. These are all the people who preached science back in 2020 and 2021 who are now conveniently ignoring this one.
And the science tells you if you have 2 X chromosomes, you're a female. If you have an X and a Y, you're a male. We've known that for a long time.
It's one of the few things we've been sure about for a long time. Where do you think Barack Obama missed the mark as far as bringing this country together?
Well, I'm not sure that he ever was really aiming at the mark. I think he grew up with the influence of his father, who was a Marxist. He grew up with the influence of Saul Alinsky. I don't know if you've ever read his book, Rules for Radicals.
Yep.
But boy, I tell you, it details in great preciseness just the things that are going on in our society. Hillary Clinton also found Alinsky to be one of her heroic people. And she said one of the people she admired the most was Margaret Sanger.
Yeah. Planned Parenthood.
I mean, I wonder, do people actually know these things?
I think they've chosen not to. And in particular with Margaret Sanger, how she literally is on camera, the founder of Planned Parenthood, saying that they want to rid the world of brown babies.
Right.
Right?
She was a hero in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And I don't think people really know who they're supporting and what they really advocate for. They don't know the history of all of this stuff.
And that's thanks in big part to the media, who has covered it up and chosen to, blurt out all different talking points.
You wonder why the media has chosen that direction. But as I said, when I was talking about the congressman who wrote in the congressional record, one of the big goals of communism was to gain control of the media. And they knew it would greatly influence the people. When I see young journalism majors and people starting out in the news industry, I always give them a little lecture about why we have the First Amendment and about the important role that the media played in the establishment of this country, and that maybe they could be on the forefront of reinvigorating the media with truth and dignity.
I do have hope for that right now.
Yeah,
I do.
It could happen.
Even with what the White House is doing and allowing a member of, the new media to come in and sit in that seat once a week in Caroline Leavitt's press conferences. And I was here in town a couple of weeks ago doing White House Podcast Row, and they bring all kinds of different people in. That gives me hope.
Yeah, it does. And, we just have to get people to have courage again. That is the real key. And that's what I discovered when I was running for president. All over the country, the biggest cities, the smallest little hamlets of North Dakota and Alabama, people had common sense, but they just didn't have courage. They just wouldn't speak up. And, they have to really stop and think about, how did this country get here? And, it took enormous courage and fortitude of those militiamen who didn't even have the appropriate fighting equipment to defeat the most powerful military force on earth. It would be like Cuba, beating the United States. It was pretty amazing. But that's our history. Our history in World War II of all those women who went into those munitions factories and were blown to bits. Yeah. Did they stop? No, they built more airplanes, tanks, and mortars than anybody could imagine. The soldiers, 16, 17 years old, who lied about their age so they could fight for our country. I mean, when I think about it, And they did that so that we could grow up in peace and freedom.
That's true courage.
That's who we are.
Yes. I do at times, and I've talked to a lot of people over the last couple of years, I do understand the fear. It is legitimate. And when people see their peers or public figures being canceled and losing their jobs, and they're not making much money anyway, you do understand it. I think the question is, what's your line? When is the line crossed? When you say enough is enough? And I had to figure out that line. And as I told Megyn Kelly when I first left ESPN, I didn't know what my line was until it was crossed. And then it was like, oh no, now it's on.
Right.
When you do something that you wish you'd never even had to face. So I do understand the fear. And it's crazy to me, though, that courage to me is, standing up and saying, I'm going to fight for this country after 9/11.
Right.
And leaving family and friends and careers. Now it takes courage to go to a school board meeting and speak up.
It does.
What would you tell people who you can tell, or you'll never meet them maybe, but who are on the verge, who want to stand up for their kids and their medical rights or whatever it is, but have that fear.
I would just say to them, the reason that you have that choice is because there were people who came before you who took that chance, who jeopardized their freedom, who jeopardized their lives so that you could have that choice. And now it's our turn.
Is that why you decided to run for president in 2016?
Well, no, I had no desire to run for president at all. If somebody had said to me, you're going to be in the political world, I would have said, you're crazy. But after I gave the presidential prayer breakfast speech in 2013, everybody was saying, you should run for president. And I said, these people are crazy. If I just ignore them, it'll go away. But it didn't go away. Every place I went, and I was giving lots of speeches and stuff, there were people with placards, run, Ben, run. I had over 500,000 petitions in my office. And I finally just said, Lord, I don't want to run for president. But if you really want me to, you have to give me all the things that a person who runs for president has: a Rolodex with all the important names, an organization, a lot of money. And I said, I'm not going to go out and develop those things for you. You'll just have to give them to me. Next thing I knew, they were all there. Our organization was raising more money than the RNC.
Oh my goodness.
It was incredible. But it gave me a lot of perspective. It gave me a chance to work with Trump. We became friends during the campaign. In fact, we promised each other whoever won, the other would be in his administration. And
you were.
And we were.
Yeah.
We were. So,
what did you learn about yourself during that whole run?
I learned that I don't particularly get threatened by threats. I don't care what people say.
What kind of threats did you receive?
Well, one of the reasons that I had a full Secret Service detail, Trump and I were the only ones who did, is because we had a lot of threats in our lives. And they determine whether you get Secret Service based on the number of threats and based on where you are in the polls. And for a while, I actually exceeded Trump in the polls. But, what I discovered about myself is that I'm not really a political animal, because when people started telling lies about me, I just said, nobody's going to believe that stuff. But they do believe it. You have to come back and you have to fight it. I did learn that.
That's hard.
Yeah.
You just wanted to come and to make a difference and bring people together and help people find that courage. And
to
then,
save our country.
Yeah. And then you're having to address ugliness that are lies.
Now, when I dropped out and decided to endorse Trump, a lot of people were very upset. They said we could never vote for him. But they all came around. And now they're all happy that they did. Mm-hmm. So we discovered that philosophically we were pretty much identical, but personality-wise we were a little different.
Mm-hmm. A little bit, you think? When you hear people call Donald Trump a racist, what do you say?
I said, these people are so far off. He's a person who just looks at people as people. And I think it's kind of interesting. You go back in history and you'll see that he received a special award from Jesse Jackson and his organization because he was so helpful to the African-American community. Isn't that interesting?
It is fascinating.
And then the same people now are calling him a racist.
Yeah.
And when he moved to Palm Beach, there was a lot of segregation in the upper echelon and in the clubs. And he said, not with his. And he fought that and advocated for opening those things up for blacks and Jews. That's not typically what a racist person would do.
No. So why do you think people have just run with that for so many years and
Because it
refuse
works.
to let go? It works to make them hate him.
Yeah, it works. You can, he's rich, and, he doesn't go out of his way to cater to this group versus that group, which was sort of the way things were intended to be in this country. If you look at the writings of our founders, you see a phrase often repeated. It's called the common good.
Mm.
What's good for everybody, not what's good for this group versus this group. And, now they're saying he's racist because he wants to get rid of DEI initiatives. Basically, what he's saying is the same thing that Dr. King was saying. Let's judge people by the content of their character. And you have to recognize that things in racial terms were already getting much better before Barack Obama came along. I mean, in my own lifetime, I remember when I was 6 years old going to Tennessee and seeing whites only and colors only signs and asking about them and being told, you can't do this and you can't do this, but it'll be okay when you go back to Detroit. I remember that distinctly. But in that same lifetime, we have black admirals and generals and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and heads of foundations and university presidents. We've had a black president in the United States. Come on. To say that and you hear people saying we haven't made any progress, it's all the time. That's craziness. We've made enormous progress. And, we don't need DEI initiatives, particularly in a field like medicine, where excellence is critical. It's a life and death issue.
Yes.
And, I just know in my own personal experience at the University of Michigan, Keith Black, who's African-American, graduated #1 in his medical school class, way before there are any DEI initiatives. Alexa Kennedy graduated #1 in her medical school class, first black female neurosurgeon. So I think we should just build on what's going on and not do things that create division and animosity and don't accomplish anything.
For what's already there, though, and
Right.
ingrained in so many people. How do we get them to listen and to stop with that and stop buying into it and realize you're just setting yourself back
Right.
by believing this? And
Well, a lot of people just don't believe that anymore. I remember when I first became an attending neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins and the chief of pediatric neurosurgeon, people would come to clinic. Some of them were obvious rednecks. And they'd see me. First of all, they'd say, when is Dr. Carson coming?
oh my gosh,
And
you're
I'd
just
say,
the janitor.
I'm
Like-
Dr. Carson. But you would see the wheels turning. This guy is black and he's young. He's chief of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. He must be really good. And then you see the black patients come in. They say, he's young, he's black, I ain't letting no affirmative action operating on my brain.
Oh my goodness.
But that had been ingrained into them that, if you were black and you were in some kind of professional position, you probably got there because somebody was giving you something. And they didn't. I don't think people think that anymore. I think when people see a black airline pilot or black, they just assume that it's good now.
I believe most people are good. There's so much more good in this country than bad. I don't believe most people are racist.
Yeah.
I think most people just, you do you and I'll do me, and let's be kind and smile and don't take too much of my money for taxes.
Exactly.
And it's actually so basic. But the focus is on, I think, that vocal minority.
And a lot of people are afraid of what they're not familiar with.
Yes.
When they become familiar with it, they're no longer afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Did it take courage for you to persevere to this point and to push through those appointments, I guess, when the white patient's looking at you one way, the black patient's looking at you another way?
well, I knew all I had to do was be who I was.
Mm-hmm.
That would take care of the problem for either side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember one grandmother said, "Have you ever done this procedure before?" She was, but by the time I got through explaining to them in terms that they could understand what's going on, they were like, "Oh man, we love this guy."
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the proof is in the pudding. And, you know, you don't have to do a lot of preaching. You just have to produce.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That tends to take care of the
And you
problem.
have.
And when you're talking about someone's health or the health of their child, believe me, they want the best. They don't care what you look like.
Mm-hmm. As it should be. Why are you not working within the Trump administration right now?
Because I'm 73 years old. And I think it's time to let the younger generation get involved. Why would somebody who's going to be dead in 20 years be making policies that are going to affect people?
Don't say it that way.
Whereas, you know, somebody who's in their 40s or 50s, they're going to be around for a long time to see what's going on and how it's going to affect them and their children. That's the way it should be. And when you think back to the beginning of our country, these guys were young. You know, they were in their 30s. Yeah. And you have a lot more energy. I mean, I have a lot less energy now than I did 20 years ago, even though you wouldn't know it by looking at my schedule.
Yes, yes. And that beautiful skin, because as they say,
they do say that, don't they?
They do say that. It's black don't crack, and it is beautiful. What do you put on your skin every day? What do you use, like water?
Water.
I cannot. Why do men always get away with that? It's so wrong.
And my wife always says, how come men have these nice
Lashes.
long eyelashes and, you know?
All of it. It's wrong. But, okay, so do you believe there should be term limits then?
Oh, most definitely. I think when our Constitution was put together, the assumption was that people would be willing to make the sacrifice to take off for a couple of years to help their communities. No one ever envisioned people making it into a career.
That's a great point.
Also, I think we probably should look at some kind of limit on justices and judges, because when the lifetime limits were put in place, people only lived into their 50s. And now they live well beyond that. And, you know, it should be something reasonable. I don't think it should be like age 70, but maybe age 80 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because the fact of the matter is people do deteriorate. And also it's nice to move aside and give somebody else a chance.
Sure. But it's interesting too, because it is a case-by-case basis. Obviously, as we witnessed over the last 4 years with Joe Biden, and Donald Trump's only 2 or 3 years behind him. And obviously by the time this term is over, he'll be in his early 80s, 82 or so.
Yeah.
He's a very different
He's
80-year-old.
I asked him several weeks ago, I said, what are you taking? I said, you're 78 years old and you got all this energy. And I said, what is it? Because I want some.
This is Dr. Carson asking Donald Trump. And what did he say?
He thought for a minute. He said, it's God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, did that surprise you?
It did take me back a little bit, but I've seen this change in him, you know, particularly since the incident in Butler, PA. And I think he realizes that he's here for a purpose now. So it's good.
Everyone who's been around him says that they saw a change in him. And I don't know how you could not be changed after going through something like that.
Well, the very good change in him is he's not so easily manipulated by the media now. It used to be they just push this button and now he just, we've got more important things to talk about, which is good.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's tough because, and then you have a Mitch McConnell and people like that who, yes, have absolutely served their country. I just don't know the magic age where we say this is enough.
Well,
how do you determine that?
What I've suggested is mental status tests for everybody in a high government position after age 70 every year. Then you have a clear indication of what's going on. It's not difficult at all.
Donald Trump has taken them and said, give me as many as you want. And then we had Joe Biden who refused to.
Yeah, and that should have told everybody what they needed to know right there.
I got to tell you, it's been kind of heartbreaking recently to see all of his former staff members coming out and saying what we knew to be the truth.
Yeah.
But the fact that now they're coming out and giving us specific stories about what they witnessed and how completely, and he was a mess. And it's heartbreaking. This has nothing to do with politics, but they enabled it and lied to our country.
Well, more importantly, who was running the country?
Right.
There's some illegality going on there.
Who do you think was running the country?
And I think we need to get to the bottom of it. I don't know. But they did a terrible job. Whoever it was, we want to make sure they don't get a chance to do it again.
I always thought Barack Obama was doing it the last couple of years.
I wouldn't be surprised if he played a significant role in what was going on. But, look how long it took him to endorse Biden, because he kind of knew what was going on.
He knew. They all knew. And then he didn't even want to endorse Kamala.
Right.
But at the end, that's why, to me, there was such a turn and such a red wave in 24, not 22,
right.
Because they saw it.
Well, I think the wave will be continued. I know a lot of people are worried about the midterms and what usually happens at the midterm. But I think the American people have better memories than that. They know the direction that we were going in. And they are smart enough to know that it's going to take a little while to turn it around. And I think anybody who's even semi-smart realizes that economically we were heading for bankruptcy. And if we didn't do something about it, it would be a total disaster.
Mm-hmm.
You would lose everything. Your children, your grandchildren would have miserable lives. And I don't think people are just going to be manipulated by the media as much as they were previously. I think they've come to learn who the media is.
Been completely exposed, yes. But I think the financial part, this hurts right now. I had a woman on a plane ask me the other day, what do you think about the tariffs? And I think
it does hurt.
It does. And my what I said to her, because I'm no expert on this at all, but I just pay attention.
Right.
I'm an American, that affects me, and I pay attention. And it was obvious, to your point, that we were headed for ruin quickly, more quickly than I think most people would like to acknowledge. Right. And it took a while to get here, and it's going to take a while to fix, and it's going to be painful along the way. I don't think it's
going to be painful that long, to be honest.
You don't?
I don't. I mean, look at what's happened to the gas prices. Look what's happened to the price of eggs. Mm-hmm. Look at the price of everything is coming down. Mortgage rates are going to be going down. Fed's going to make another lowering. They say they're not, but they are. And I think with all these countries coming to make deals now, it's not going to be a long pain.
Are you surprised at how quickly this administration has done all of this, taken all these actions in less than 100 days?
I'm pleasantly surprised because, Trump knows that his time is short before people give up. And that's why he's, it's kind of interesting. Back in the 30s, there were these two professors at Columbia University, Cloward and Piven. And, they were socialists. And they said the best, easiest way to change things is you hit the opposition with so many things they can't figure out which one to respond to. I think he's doing that today.
Yeah, that's right. Uppercut.
That's right.
I mean, I could, of course, but I would never want to be a White House reporter right now because every single day there's breaking news. It's chaos. It's chaos. And it's fun, I guess, if you are, if you lean center right to watch this. But I do need one favor. I need you. Can you convince them, whoever it is in the administration, to continue with the transparency, but take it up a level when it comes to what's happening right now with fully explaining the tariffs, even with Doge. You can go on doge.gov and see things and understand it. But there are so many people who are eloquent enough to explain things better and put it out there in layman's terms to say this. Here's where we are right now. Here's where, when I took office, here's what it's going to take to fix it. Here's the pain along the way. And here's what's to come.
Right.
I feel like it just hasn't been explained enough for people to not be panicking as we've watched the stock market, et cetera. Can we get a little bit more clarity before it gets ugly? Something else will come.
Very good suggestion. Very
Help.
Good. We will.
Can you do that for us?
Absolutely.
Like, Dr. Carson, we need your help. It's just a lot. I trust, but I understand why people are scared and freaking out financially. What would you tell them?
I would tell them to cool your jets because help is on the way. We have an administration that actually understands what's going on. We have leadership in the world right now. You saw how quickly the world deteriorated when we went for 4 years with no leadership. All of this is being rectified right now. And I think we're going to be in a stronger position than we have ever been in before. And it's about time that it was done.
Yeah.
And it would not have been done, I think, with someone with less courage than Donald Trump.
And I am so grateful. And I trust all of it. I'm just trying to sometimes speak for those who are fearful and believe the talking points that come out on, the mainstream media still. I do think that is something. Donald Trump was incredible during the campaign by talking about what he learned the first time and how he would do things differently and how he maybe trusted certain people for too long, didn't pull the trigger to get someone out quickly enough. I love that.
Yeah.
That's true leadership as well, is acknowledging when things could be done better. And I think that's what I'm hoping for right now is just more communication versus less when people are scared and losing a lot of money right now, even though I do believe it's going to come back.
It's going to come back. A lot of it came back today.
It did. I know. But you sense this tension, and trust me, we talked about this. I had to send my kid, one of the kids, all in college, asking for a couple bucks for her sorority, blah, blah, blah. And I looked and my statement came up and I went, whoa, okay, I'm going to scroll past that and I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to come back in a couple weeks. Is that the advice? Is that what I should do? Ignore for now?
Yeah, don't think of, well, you can look at it tonight because I think you'll be pleased. But it's going to be back and forth, a little rocky for a little while. But remember, you got 70 plus countries lining up to make a deal with the world's best deal maker.
The best. It is a beautiful thing to watch. You have a lot to do. I'm going to let you go, but I wanted to share this because I know you would appreciate this. The day before the election, I was with Tulsi Gabbard in North Carolina, and we were boots on the ground talking to hurricane victims who'd really been left behind by the government. Incredible people. 6 stops in Buncombe County, North Carolina, throughout Asheville, before we met the president in Pittsburgh at that last rally, and then in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And for that traditional last rally. Right. And on the plane ride home, home to Palm, as if Palm Beach is my home. For him, it was 5:30 in the morning, and we were landing, election morning.
Mhm.
This man had the music up so loud the entire time, because you know how he is with his iPad,
Right.
DJing the whole time.
Mm.
Everybody's exhausted and falling asleep, including the Secret Service member, and all of us are like, oh my gosh. And he didn't need the sleep. It's incredible.
He doesn't sleep.
It's incredible to me, his energy, and he doesn't have to do this. He
No.
genuinely wants to do this. Selfishly, that was a moment that it was so surreal for me, and I got emotional because I thought, what am I doing here on Trump Force One?
Right.
As it's election morning, to be able to witness history, because that's what this is. And I do believe that we will look back.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, I hope it's within his lifetime. I hope at some point he'll get the credit he deserves. Do you think that's possible?
I think it's eminently possible. I think things are going to turn around very rapidly. And I think a lot of the Democrats who don't have a home right now, because the radical elements have taken over the party, will find a very comfortable place to be.
You did it as a former Democrat.
I did.
And Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
And RFK. And Elon Musk. And Donald Trump.
And a lot of people.
Millions.
And it's really not even about Democrats and Republicans. It's about people who love and appreciate the nation that we have.
Yes.
And people who want something different. And or people who are simplistic enough to allow themselves to be manipulated and used.
Do you understand how much you've inspired people like me and millions throughout this world?
Probably not, but I run into people everywhere, no matter where I go, who tell me how much my life inspired them. And I realize how old I am because in the field of medicine, it used to be medical students who would tell me that. And then it was residents. And then it was assistant professors. And then it was associate professors. And then it was full professors. And then it was deans of the medical school. I said, I'm getting old.
You are. But are you able to receive those words from so many? Because we mean it.
It's a blessing. And I'm thrilled that God saved me on November 28th, 1972.
Our world would not be the same without you. And reading your books, watching everything on you for all these years has been the biggest blessing. And you are the person that I've used to say, look, no excuses. He chose this and chose to overcome and chose to make it about your hard work and your skills and your faith, not about the color of your skin. So I just want to thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for being brave, because you've had a few slings and arrows and you've managed to power your way through it.
Good parents, and I have the utmost faith, and more now than ever. And I just feel so blessed. And the fact that you said yes to come talk to me.
Well, I was honored to come and talk to you. I'm very familiar with your career.
Gosh, now look. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you for all that you've done. Thank you.
God bless.
I'm dying. Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Dr. Carson, before you get out,